2/3 of the globe and meet our not only emissions. We also have to work on increasing energy efficiency to lower the energy demand itself. And there is a significant untapped potential when it comes to energy efficiency. For example, in the United States, almost 70% of the energy that is being produced is currently wasted. And this is a fantastic opportunity.
Reusing wasted energy will also bring other benefits, such as lowering the energy bills of consumers and companies, creating new jobs, and increasing energy security and resilience. The time for action is now. Why? And it's very simple. The world's demand for energy is rising, not falling. Right now, in some regions of the world, on a hot day when you blast your air conditioner and start the vacuum cleaner at the same time, lights are going to start blinking unless we act. It's time to stop wasting and time to make use of our valuable energy.
Correct. And during last year's COP28 in Dubai, the world's leaders historically agreed on a global pledge to double the rate of energy efficiency improvements by 2030. So far, according to the latest analysis from the International Energy Agency, we are far from on track. Last year, we have went from 2% improvement to 1% improvement, and we need to go to 4%.
The current finance models for cities are also not that helpful. Some call it a patchwork, others simply call it messy. We need to find a streamlined financing model to make this happen at scale and on time.
And there is also a new challenge on the horizon. The exponential growth of artificial intelligence, cloud computing, and also our streaming services is making an increase in data center demand all over the world. And these data centers are also consuming large amount of energy that increase the demand for energy in the world even more. In addition to that, 90% of the energy that data centers consumes is actually today being wasted.
Madeleine, you mentioned earlier about the wasted energy in the United States, but let me say that today in Europe alone, almost 3,000 terawatts of heat is wasted every year, disappearing into thin air or being released into our rivers. This waste heat is equal to almost the EU's total energy demand for heat and hot water. Luckily, these problems can be turned into solutions.
Absolutely.
This waste heat can be reused to heat our buildings and our cities, and thanks to new technologies, it can also be turned into cooling.
So in this session today, we're going to hear about all of these solutions of how we can recover the excess heat from data centers, but also industries, in order to accelerate the city's net zero transitions. First, we will focus in on the government and policy sessions. And with us to do that, I have a fantastic guest with me here in the studio. We will first have Thomas Spencer, the analyst at the International Energy Agency, also Directorate for Sustainability, Technology and Outlooks. With us here, we also have Mattias Frumery, our Chief Ambassador for Swedish Minister of Climate and Enterprise, and also our Chief Negotiator here at COP. And with us digitally at Zoom, we also have Katrin Skärfeldt-Jamet, ICLEI Global President and Chair of Sustainable, Circular and Innovation Procurement Portfolio in the ICLEI Global Executive Committee. And Katrin, you're also which is the third largest city in Sweden. So Katrin, if we start with you, one of the 112 net zero cities in Europe. Where is Malmö right now on this journey? And is there any learnings from other cities that you can share with us?
Thank you. I really appreciate to be part of this panel. I'm representing Malmö, and we have been working very hard for a couple of decades. And we have lowered our greenhouse gas emissions by 50%. And this can be compared with the level of emissions in Sweden that has been lowered by 38%. And I'm proud to say that last year we reached the same level as 2020, which was a year when the COVID pandemic made us unable to travel like we do a normal year. So I would say that we made a step further ahead. We have been working really hard with different kind of climate city contracts since 2021, which means that we cooperate with lots of different actors. Like we signed more than 50 different climate city contracts involving more than 600 actors with ambition to reach the targets together. And it's just to give you some examples, we have actors from within the construction sector, real estate companies, actors within the sector of water, waste management, energy, but also restaurants and our local football club and educational institutions. So I think the way we're working is to connect all different actors to make sure that we make improvements together.
That's
And
fantastic.
we have been part of global networks for quite a long time, and we're working together with the other net zero cities in Europe and in Sweden, in Viable Cities, for example, and within ICLAIB, for example, just to give each other our best practices and share solutions and work together.
So fantastic to hear that it's partnerships and collaborations across all different actors that is the key to really accelerate the city's perspective. So Katrin, you're also the board of directors of ICLAIB, where you also represent 2,600 cities and local government. Can you tell us a little bit more about what ICLAIB is doing and how you are driving this transition?
Well, we are a global network, and we connect 2,600 towns, cities, and regions with ambitions when it comes to sustainability. And well, we are, as I said before, when it comes to Malmö, we are sharing our best practices, and we are trying to inspire each other, and we're working to fund different projects and to give the local level a strong voice. It's both when it comes to the green transition, but also when it comes to different initiatives when it comes to climate adaptation, for example. And since 70% of the global greenhouse gas emissions stem from urban areas, we work really hard to give the cities and the regions a strong voice globally and nationally to make sure that our needs are met in a better way so that we are actually able to deliver the work that has to be done locally. So this is a way to connect cities from all over the world. We are struggling with the same kind of questions, but different circumstances, of course, but we are really working hard together.
And you feel we're making the right progress from a city perspective?
I think we can see that we have lots of cities that actually address the work and that they are recognizing that they need to do more, and they are willing to do more, but they lack resources. And quite often, when I talk to my colleagues, they have lots of they would like to do more, but need to collaborate more with the national government, for example, and they really need to have some help to address their issues. So it's about policy making, and it's about financing. This is a huge issue, but I think more and more people do address and recognize that we can't deliver the Paris Agreement, the goals within the Paris Agreement, if we don't bring the local actors to the tables and reach some, so that they reach more funding.
Absolutely. So I want to connect back to COP28 because ICLAIB was also part of the Coalition for High Ambition Multi-Level Partnership for Climate Action. Can you also tell us a little bit
Show level of climate, we are actually the low level, and I think as we speak, we had 74 nations signing this pledge, and I think this is a good start, but we need more nations to sign and start to collaborate with the local level.
Yes. Thank you, Katrin. I think that is a good handover also to Matthias, who sits with us. I mean, you have quite been involved in the UN's negotiation process for quite some time. How can these international processes that you are part of fast forwarding these energy efficiency solutions and also bring in the city perspective?
Thanks. I'd like to pick up on 2 points which you raised also in your introduction. Firstly, you mentioned the solutions, and I think that's really key to highlight the solutions which are available. That provides and gives confidence to policymakers that they can set higher targets, but also the kind of targets we set last year at COP28, when we agreed not only to double energy efficiency by 2030, but also to triple renewable energy and transition away from fossil fuels in energy systems. So setting those kind of global targets, as well as having the solutions available, I think that the challenge for us now and the opportunity for us is really sort of to bring those two tracks together, the kind of goals we're setting at the global level to make sure that they can be implemented at a national and of course a local level as well, building on the kind of solutions that so many actors around here have available. So sort of to make sure that the voices are heard, that the solutions are out there and then can be applied into policy making
And
as
how
well.
can we do that? How do we bring that together? Because that's the key point.
I think having conversations like this, making sure that these kind of voices are heard. I've had the multiple various conversations that I've had with industry leaders here, just here at COP29. I think it's very clear to me that what business actors are looking for is clarity in policy signals from occasions like these. So for us, from the Swedish and the EU side, what we want to see coming out from COP29 is a confirmation of the kind of targets we set last year at COP28 and ensure further clarity in terms of how they will be implemented. And of course, next year is a pivotal year since all countries are coming together to present their new nationally determined contributions, or the NDCs, or the national climate plans. So what we want to see is a reflection of the various solutions that are available, but also how countries are implemented the targets we set at COP28, and see that reflected in the NDCs.
And that was actually my second question. Because how do we take the double down target? How do we take this energy efficiency part, which is so connected to the cities, into the negotiation? How do we ensure that that is part of the now revised NDCs, so it's part of the COP30 plans?
Well, maybe we don't have to bring it so much into the negotiations themselves. I think it's important for countries here to be aware that the solutions are out there, because that will facilitate the decision-making process here. But ultimately, it's at the national level that awareness has to be clear. That the various actors that can provide the solutions have that kind of dialogue and interaction at the national level to instill that kind of confidence by policymakers at the national level and the local level to make them to facilitate their decision making and setting those kind of policies and reflecting that in the new NDCs and sort of in their national climate policy frameworks or whatever kind of national frameworks they have, but ultimately to be reflected then on the national level. So we really need to get more granular from the global level. We set the targets, but now it's time for all the parties, all the countries to reflect that in their work on national.
Yeah. Is there something we can do to really make that happen? Because now we're here.
Well, I think we sort of the more energy we can get from the global level to actually instill that kind of confidence and set the direction clearly. Hopefully we can then be all of us actors working also at the national level. And for us, for example, working through our embassies, through our various business networks that are present on the ground in the various countries that we want to be working with, and hopefully bringing together those kind of partnerships together with our EU partners, together with others, to ensure that that kind of action is being taken on the national level.
So, I mean, you said it yourself, solutions exist. We need to accelerate them at scale. I think that is where the issue sits. I think you hear that the industry and the private sector is ready to invest and stand behind this one. And still we hear that we are not on track for the double down target, right? So from your perspective, why do you see that not more is happening when it comes to this topic around energy efficiency?
Well, obviously, I mean that there are all countries have their different types of challenges. But I would think, for what we try to do from the Swedish side is basically work along 3 tracks. On the one hand, the policy track, sort of just to share experience in terms of how can you design your policy on a national level to accelerate action. Secondly, and also as the mayor was saying, make sure that there is finance allocated to implement that kind of policy. And thirdly, to unleash the innovative capacity and the technologies that already exist from the business sector. And hopefully by bringing these 3 tracks together, the policy, finance and technology, we can support countries in actually accelerating their transition. And hopefully by sort of setting policies which create demand for new types of solutions, deploying the solutions, which in turn could help to even further ramp up the targets in terms of emission reductions, and setting in new kinds of policies, which in turn will create demand for more technical solutions. So hopefully that's a virtuous circle in a way by deploying those 3 elements.
Sounds really good. So Thomas, you at the International Energy Agency are looking quite deeply at the moment into artificial intelligence and what happens to data centers in terms of energy demands, right? So from your perspective, what do you see as the challenges but also opportunities when we have this increase of energy demand coming from data centers?
Yeah, it's a very interesting time to look at this question for sure. I think every second conversation that I have here in Baku is about AI. So the way that the IEA looks at it is there is the question of the footprint of artificial intelligence, notably in terms of energy demand. And then there's the question of the opportunities provided by artificial intelligence to solve some of the problems in the energy system, to accelerate innovation, to improve efficiencies, to accelerate the uptake of renewable energy, for example. On the footprint side, today data centers make up about 1% of global electricity demand, so it's not much. But the problem is that they're very spatially concentrated. They tend to cluster together, and that creates a lot of challenges for grids at the local level in terms of the amount of generation capacity that may need to be added, in terms of the amount of grid infrastructure that may need to be added. So that's the challenge that we see on the footprint side. For the moment, we don't see it as a big game changer in terms of global energy demand, but it is a challenge at the local level. It's a challenge in some states, in some smaller countries like Ireland, for example. And then on the opportunity side, we see a lot of potential for artificial intelligence to accelerate the energy transition. So, for example, energy innovation is a key thing that we need to accelerate, and applying AI tools to discover new materials, new battery chemistries is showing a lot of promise. So we see opportunities on the energy transition side from artificial intelligence.
You mentioned this on the challenges of the local demand when it can come up to 20, 30, 40% if you're really specific on certain data center locations. Can you elaborate a little bit more on why these challenges comes from a grid and energy supply perspective, from a systemic perspective that this happens?
So let me put it this way. A large data center can be about 100 megawatt of demand. That's comparable in size to a steel plant, so it's a big energy demand, but they cluster close together. Unlike steel plants, which are spatially dispersed, you get data centers coming up around specific infrastructure nodes, if there's fiber optic cables, around specific demand sources, for example, close to financial hubs, because finance uses a lot of data and likes there to be very rapid transfer of data, so they concentrate locally. So what we see is system operators being overwhelmed by the number of grid connections that are being requested, not being able to process them, not having enough grid capacity to meet those connection requests. In some places, concerns about the adequacy of generation capacity, and so places that are saying we need to add new generation capacity, and that may need to be fossil-based because demand is increasing so rapidly. And at the same time, the outlook is very uncertain. So nobody is very clear how rapidly demand from data centers is going to grow. So for people trying to plan the outlook for the electricity system, to know how much grid infrastructure needs to be in this location, how much generation capacity needs to be in that location, it's a big challenge because of the uncertainty.
And we mentioned it here in the beginning as well, when we have such a rapid increase of the number of data centers, and we know when we hear about talking energy efficiency as well, right? Only 90% is being wasted of the energy produced. Do you see any good examples of where we're now moving into recovering and using that excess heat that actually is a source of energy for someone else, as are the data centers?
So there is a really significant and important agenda around data center efficiency. And here I want to highlight the challenge that is being created by speed. Because people are building or proposing data centers so rapidly, it's not necessarily the case that these are being designed from an optimal perspective for energy efficiency, that they're being located from an optimal perspective for integration of waste heat. And so there's a real issue for national policymakers, for regulators to consider how we can incentivize the most energy efficient construction of data centers, including in the design and conception phase. And there's some very interesting examples from companies like Schneider Electric and others, including Alfa Laval, of technologies that can be used to make data centers more energy efficient. Some of that will be on the hardware side, so we see continued improvements in computing hardware efficiency. It's been doubling roughly every 2 years. That may continue and will bring a lot of benefits. And then on this issue of waste heat integration, there are a number of interesting examples, notably in the Nordic countries. So the Stockholm data center plan, integrating waste heat from data centers into the district heating system. There are projects in Helsinki in Finland doing similarly. So I think there's a lot of potential there. I would just be a little bit careful about assuming that this can solve all of the district heating problems, right? It's part of the solution, but it's not by any means the only one. Also because these are huge infrastructures. People don't like them near cities. And so you have the issue of transferring heat from the data center to the city. Maybe in the future we'll see industry starting to come up next to data centers and have industry to industry coupling rather than industry to residential coupling.
Yeah, so the sector coupling coming into approach. So with that, we would like to thank you, both Matthias, Thomas and Katrin, for joining us here in the studio. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So it's now time to focus on the industry aspect of energy efficiency, and especially how data centers and industry can accelerate net zero cities with the help of our next set of very interesting guests. They are Thomas Muller. We've been practicing that a little bit. It's a little bit better than normal. President of the Energy Division of Alfa Laval. David Rademacher, Vice President Sustainability and Climate at E.ON. And Farouk Shad, Head of Sustainability Business for the APMEA region, which is a new acronym for me. Asia Pacific, India, Middle East and Africa region. All right, at Schneider Electric. Great to see you. On Zoom, we've got Dr. Holger Klaassen. Hello. Good. And he's
Hello.
Director Corporate Energy and Climate Affairs for Arubus. That's delivering heat to the city of Hamburg in Germany. And also in our Stockholm studio, we have Cecilia Jetschel, who is CSO and CMO of T-Loop. And we'll learn more about that. That's quite interesting. Thomas, connecting industries and cities to reuse heat. Sector coupling, it's called. It's nothing new. Tell us how Alfa Laval has been working with this for more than 50 years. and what are your learnings, and why is this so relevant today?
Yeah, thanks, Nick, and fantastic work in pronouncing our names. Well done. No, it's right. We have been working with this for decades. Like you mentioned in the beginning, more than 50% of the waste or heat or energy used is going to waste. But already back in 1974, that's where we were the first large-scale waste heat recovery project was put in place in Sweden. Actually a process industry, Kemira, and reusing that heat from that plant into the district heating network is equal to 60,000 cars or pollution avoidance equal to that, so it has a massive effect. And that's 50 years ago, so we know how to do it. We have now also done it with Aurubis, or Aurubis has done this, where we have supported that project. I'm sure we will hear more about that. But it's still examples here and there. So I think where we have seen a lot of buildings improving the energy efficiency with windows, insulations, etc. Same with the industries. They are reusing as much heat they can on the plant. But as soon as it comes to sector coupling, we are still at this one example here, one example there. And now, of course, with data centers booming everywhere, we have to take care of this waste heat generation and repurpose it.
Yep. David, you were working in so-called heat zones in the UK. I was looking at that project, by the way, at Bankside, in central London, opposite St Paul's on the South Bank. Very interesting. Tell us what they are and what you're doing, and you're harvesting the heat, basically, right?
Yeah, absolutely, that's right. Let me quickly connect to Thomas on data centers are just, or the demand for energy for data centers is exploding. Data centers will increase in energy consumption by a factor 5 until 2028. That means if data centers were a country, they would be just as large as Germany. And we did some math on this. Data centers in Germany alone could deliver 20% of the heat for district heating systems in Germany. So that's massive. And you could also say data centers are, in the end, they are heaters that also can handle data. They are energy producers, and that's important. So in heat zones in the UK, that's exactly what we're doing. Thomas, you talked about how surplus energy is recovered, and we bring this to the demand in the cities. So we're designing with our award-winning technology, Ectogrid. Actually, we received an award at COP29 in Dubai. Ectogrid is a low-temperature district heating system, and we can there actually utilize this heat. We can bring this to the demand. And as you said, in central London, we have a project where we're reducing the CO2 emissions compared to gas boilers by close to 90%. Just simply via recovering the heat, and that's impact.
Right, so it is happening, right? It is happening. It could be happening a lot faster, but it is happening. Let me now go to Holger. Hello, Holger. So you got this huge project with something called Warme Hamburg to expand Germany's largest industrial heat system. Holger, can you tell us more?
Yes, I can. First of all, thanks for having me. Unfortunately, I couldn't join in person, but I hope this works as well. Aurubis is one of the largest copper smelters worldwide, and we have this unique thing that we're located right in the middle of the city. And we have lots of waste heat here in our plant. Most of it we use on ourselves. 90% of our own steam demand is covered by our own waste heat. And we have this exothermal reaction in the copper refining process, where we smelt the copper concentrates and let them react with oxygen. And then we have a real huge amount of waste heat. And we started in 2018 when here a whole new part of the city, the Hafen City, was built in the harbor. We thought of delivering this heat to the households there. And right this summer, we fulfilled the second and the third step of this very huge project. And right now, we are able to to supply 28,000 households with our waste heat, which is totally CO2 free because of this exothermic reaction we have, and that is roundabout. I have an echo on myself from Stockholm, I think. Maybe you can switch that off.
We're hearing you perfectly clear here. Perfectly clear
perfect.
yeah, sorry.
I try to get over it. And we save 120,000 tons of CO2 each year by this project. So that shows that the industry is not part of the problem of the climate crisis, but can also be part of the solution.
Holger, what's this copper production that's involved in the heating here? Copper production?
Yeah, it is. It is
copper production. Okay.
It is copper production, exactly. Yeah.
What happens if they shut the copper production down? Where do you get the heat after that?
That is one of the biggest challenges with industrial waste heat, that it is not secured and you have these plant shutdowns every couple of years. Right. The good thing is that the heat is needed only in the winter times. And we try to do our shutdowns and revision works in the summertime. But the energy supplier who's using the heat and selling it to the households, they need to have some backup heat plans as well.
Got you. And just give us a brief glimpse into how was this funded? Where did the money come from to actually get this project up and running? Briefly.
Yeah. What I can tell you, there is no business case, so you need external funding. We received some or a huge amount of Ministry of Economy and Climate, and you need to. The problem is that you have different amortization periods in the industry, which is around about 5 years, and energy infrastructure has amortization periods of 30 years. So you need to try to shift the payment to the front of the investment, and that's what we did with these state subsidies.
Right.
And with the Hamburg Wärme energy supplier.
So God bless the German government there. Okay.
Yeah, that was a big help. Otherwise, it wouldn't have worked.
Farouk, we talked a lot about how to use waste heat to heat our buildings, but this heat can also be turned into cooling, right? And can you tell us how this works?
Sure. Let me start by thanks for having me on the panel.
Yeah.
And for
thank Alpha Laval, actually.
And for pronouncing Atmea correctly as well.
Well, I'm going to get a little gold star after this, aren't I?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'm representing Schneider Electric. So we are involved in the infrastructure of the data centers. And data centers today account for 1% of the electricity consumption globally, 1.5%. And also 1% on the greenhouse gas emissions. So there's a lot of waste, which of course can be converted, and it can be liquid cooling is what is needed. And Schneider is playing a big role in liquid cooling. And that is, we recently acquired a company in the US as well for liquid cooling, because we believe with that technology and with absorption technology, we'll be able to tackle that. Because moving forward with AI and with large language modules, we'll see the expansion of data centers everywhere. So we want to make sure that we are able to convert the heat, we are able to convert that with liquid technology into use.
Right. So you take the heat with some kind of heat converter, you cool it, and then you cool the building, cool the data center. Yep. So it's this kind of virtual loop.
That's
a little bit the circular economy. Oh wow.
Something
Okay.
Like
All right. You're Schneider's Schneider Electric's head of sustainability business for this very big region, right? Is this concept of liquid cooling, do you think, starting to catch on? I mean, how many projects do you have? Have you started? Will you start? How many are interested? Is it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you see, the Asia Pacific region, the rate of digitization, the internet usage is super high. So we see a lot of data centers coming up in the region, and hence everyone moving into the liquid cooling technology there.
Right.
So for Asia Pacific, for Middle East, we see a huge demand for Middle East as well.
Right.
Now, India, on the other hand, is still at the early stages. But of course,
But
with
it's
the
gonna
population
come,
in
isn't
India
it?
is going to come
Yeah,
as well.
it's gonna
So
come
the
big time.
emerging markets is the next frontier for us.
Yeah. Okay, got you. Just hold that, guys. We are gonna have a discussion afterwards, Thomas. Let me just. I don't want to forget Cecilia, who's also here on the magic of Zoom in Stockholm. Cecilia, hi. Now you've got a solution that's a little bit different, right? So tell us what T-Loop is doing in terms of data centers into energy plants.
Yes, just like that. We turn data centers into energy plants. And we do that by building them in existing buildings in urban cities. We do not need to build them as big because we come from the energy perspective. So we always calculate the need of heat first, and then we match the data capacity for that. And we build it, as I said, in existing buildings. And a data center, as you know, has a lot of untapped assets. We do produce a lot of heat, and that one we can use to warm up the buildings we're located in, nearby buildings, or tap into the district heating net. But we also have the power capacity in the reserve capacity, like gensets, which we have in batteries, and that we have actually developed our own service for, a software and the hardware, so we can use that for grid balancing and for peak shaving, but still guarantee the uptime for our IT customers. Because I think it's also worth mentioning that we are the infrastructure of digitalization. So this is what the data center is. I mean, we couldn't be here broad alive today if there weren't a data center somewhere in the world hosting this session. So we are needed, but we also need to change the way we do it today.
So just give a glimpse into this. So people think if you want a data center, it's got to be as big as the Titanic, right? But what you're saying is, no, you can have smaller data centers, more distributed in some ways, but they're located in buildings, so you've got a direct customer for the heat, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I mean, if we start thinking about that, I mean, we use the data mainly where people live in the cities. So it's actually better to produce the data and use the data in the cities. I mean, that the network also takes energy. And if we all talk about power constraints today, because I think it was mentioned earlier in the previous session, it's quite hard to find power connectivity. But if we, as we do, we identify where there are unused resources in the existing buildings, and then we can use that. So we sort of connect ourselves to the building who has an untapped resource to that power, and then we can maximize the data capacity based on what we have.
Good, and you're already connected to a grid, so that's also useful too. All right, thanks very much. We're going to have a little chat about all this. I mean, there's loads of, the microphones are shooting up like rockets on firework night. Okay, actually, to be honest, Thomas was first. I have to be... I'm managing the playground here. Thomas was first, and he must go first. Thomas.
Yeah, no, I was just want to reconnect to the AI and the streaming services, because it's really the traditional data centers. You could do a lot of, you could do the cooling in principle with air cooling. But what's happening now is with the demands going up, the energy intensity go up of each server. So you have no chance of doing air cooling anymore. So you have to do liquid cooling. It's simply, there is no other way. But that's also a good thing from a heat reuse perspective, because what you call a heat converter, Nick, we prefer to call it a heat exchanger.
Okay, fine.
That's
all right. That's why I'm not in this business.
It's much easier with liquid cooling to recover that heat and reuse it. And then I love what Cecilia is saying, because I think it's really coming down to city planning. Because right now we have so many data centers placed in areas where there is no way to use the waste heat. It's simply too far away from the usage points.
Yeah.
So,
David, you want to jump in?
That's exactly the point that we need to discuss, because data centers need a lot of energy, and they, of course, then produce a lot of excess heat. But we have the issue as grid operator. I mean, E.ON is largest distribution system operator in Europe. We have the issue that in Frankfurt, for example, the German city of Frankfurt, grid capacity is booked out for the next 10 years. So currently, it takes 2 to 4 years to build a data center, but it takes 3 times as long, up to 12 years, to actually connect the data center. And that's because data centers, if they're built in cities where there's grid congestion already, that makes it very hard for us. So
Right.
we'll always have to think both ends: energy
Yeah.
input, energy output. And so this is, Nick, you asked, we could always do more, and why don't we do more? It's the system perspective. We're working on all ends of the system right now, and that's very complex.
Well, it's the same with renewable energy. Some people are waiting 10 years for a connection for a new wind farm, right?
Off-grid?
Yeah, off-grids, yeah. I mean, we heard something earlier about Google, for example. Oh, a woman from the American solar thing was saying that Google is now kind of just going off-grid, right? But you're in a developing country region. This is really interesting. So I understand that the need for the cooling, but is there district heating in your region where they could take the heat demand?
There is in the Middle East.
Right.
We see that as well. My perspective on this is that to counter this, it's a team sport. So we need to collaborate together, and we need radical collaboration. And I think, coming back to your point that you were mentioning earlier, we need collaboration with the governments, we need collaboration with the private sector, and that is something missing today, or it's not enough, let's put it like that. And I think that will take us further, because clearly there's a demand, clearly the data centers are going to be more and more intense, more energy consumption will be there, and that collaboration is something we need to look at.
Right. I've got a whole sea of questions here, so we've got 8 minutes 25. Now, just because you're on Zoom doesn't mean you're invisible, okay? So I'm going to keep looking a little bit. If you raise your hands, then you have to jump in, okay? Let's just go back to this patchwork of financing. You just touched on that there. There clearly is, it's a bit messy, right? For a city to just be able to move ahead. Anybody got any bright ideas in addition to the previous bright ideas we heard? I mean, you've got some experience, Holger. What are you finding, for example, Cecilia, with your centres? Or do you actually overcome that problem because you're at smaller scale within buildings that already exist? Or what is it?
No, I mean, we're facing those challenges as well as we need to. I mean, a data center is very costly to establish. And normally, as I said, we're part of the infrastructure. And if we look on how the financial market works for the infrastructure funds today, or the core funds, they're looking for stable investments where they can really calculate on a long-term investment. And I think they need to change slightly. I think we need some other type of metrics where we can see what will the future infrastructure be, and perhaps have a larger risk appetite also from the investment side on that. I think that's necessary. And also, coming back, there was a very interesting report from McKinsey I think it's a month ago, and it says that it's probably needed 250 to 300 billion US dollar to be invested in data centers. And I think actually data centers also need to take part of that investment and place it into the energy infrastructure to have that in their business case as well.
Well, then that's policy and regulation, isn't it, as well, as being, unless they're just all anyway, right? Holger, I mean, you had support from the German government with subsidies and things like that, but were there other sources? Were they tough to get, or is there, I mean, it'd be great just to be given the whole money from one place, bang, right? But so many people have the detritus of the bureaucracy of our countries to actually find little pots of money that add up, right? Which isn't much fun.
Exactly. The problem is you need planning security. The energy suppliers investing lots in pipelines and the infrastructure, and we're investing a lot, and you need planning security. And of course, it helps if you're right in the middle of the city, as we are. But what would also help, and that's a regulatory thing, is if you would have a green market. So since May in Germany, we have a new instrument of certificates of origin for green heat. But actually we can't use them because there is no demand, because the private customer can't really choose to buy green heat. So we don't get an add-on on this. And the second thing that would maybe help is if it would be taken into account somehow within the CO2 allowance grant. We get free allowances from the European Union, and this heat is only accepted at a very, very small amount, even though we save 120,000 tons of CO2 each year. And here in Hamburg, in Scope 1 emissions, we only have 150,000 in total. So by this only, we could call ourselves almost carbon neutral. And
Right.
that is another incentive that would maybe help to make others follow our
So
example.
the EU needs to value that waste heat much better than it does currently with these. Okay.
Exactly.
Thomas.
Yeah, I think it's also about putting demands on where we put up data centers and what demands there are on data centers, as Cecilia says. And here we talk about Germany a lot, but Germany is actually a bit front runner in this regulatory putting demands on data centers that by 2026 they need to have 10% heat recovery or heat reuse. By 2028 it's 20%. And that will, of course, drive this forward. So they have it in mind when they already put up a greenfield data center. Then, of course, we also have to continue build out the district heating network, because today's network can take so much heat, but that has to continue so that we continue replacing gas and oil boilers, which today is just polluting. I mean, so it's also about that infrastructure. It's not only the sector coupling, but also making that grid bigger.
But in many countries, if you build something on a greenfield site, right, or if you build something in a place, you have to spend some money on restoring that area to the nature that it was when you arrived, right? There are some quite, why couldn't they have a rule that says if you're going to build a huge data center on the edge of town, you have to invest in the cities, in a district heating system for the city, or at least a co-owner, a co-financer, or there could be all kinds of creative ways to...
And if there was heat recovery credits
Yeah.
to support that also, then
Yeah,
you
there
could
we
get
go.
things moving.
Yeah.
I don't think we have a lack of involvement from governments on corporate action. So I think it's not about another policy and obligations to build up district heating. I think it's about utilizing the existing systems. And the problem, and that's also what Holger said, is that in calculations for business cases, heat prices are very different. It's a very local thing. So while we have a big affordability discussion about energy prices since the gas crisis, since the war in Ukraine, there's a lot of pressure on energy prices, and power prices and gas prices are strongly regulated. For heat prices, it always depends on the local situation. So there is no such thing as the one-size-fits-all solution, and that's what makes it so difficult. You always have to take into account also what kind of heat source are you replacing with your recovery. So it's extremely difficult regulatory-wise.
I mean, we've talked about the liquid cooling for the data centers, but could you imagine in some of the hotter countries of the region you're in, they might one day want district cooling systems?
We have district cooling.
Oh, there you go then, you see.
We do
That's
have
amazing.
that, absolutely. But coming back to the point, in emerging economies, we need policy work that needs to happen, and which is something where a lot of time needs to be spent in this whole public-private partnership, especially with the non-profit or the NGOs as well. There's a lot of investment that needs to be done from a finance side also, to make sure we are utilizing the investment, we are utilizing and moving forward on the technology side.
Well, maybe we just end briefly on that, because actually just maybe two people can answer, right? Who's going to facilitate the collaborations between the public and the private? Whose job is it? Quickly. Father Christmas? No? I mean, who's supposed to do this?
I have a perspective that private can take the lead purely because of efficiency.
Okay. Yeah, is it the private taking the lead? Okay, fair enough. I think that was a really interesting session. Thank you so much to our guests coming in by the magic of Zoom from Germany and also from Stockholm, and the fantastic panel here. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
In this final session, we will take a closer look into the financing part and how we can replace what was previously called by Nick the financial patchwork. So a super complex network of how we can get the finance to work, both for data centers, we have the excess heat part, but also the whole sustainable cities angle. And this is a finance COP, so it's all about how we unlock that finance that is required for our double down target for 2030. So we have the pleasure to have two final guests with us here on the show today. I have Aditi Maheshwari, the Managing Director for Climate Action Implementation at C40, a global network of nearly 100 mayors of the world's leading cities. I also have with me Sean Kidney, the CEO of Climate Bonds Initiative, an international organization that is aiming to mobilize the global capital for climate action. So welcome both of you. If we start with you, Aditi, when and why did the C40 start to have a financial institution?
Thank you for having me, firstly. So, as you mentioned, C40 is a global network of 100 of the world's largest cities leading on climate action. Our cities and our mayors have the ambition, the commitment, and the ideas on how to take forward climate action, but they need support on how to turn these ideas into bankable projects. And that's where the C40 Cities Finance Facility comes in. It is, I would say, it's not a financial institution, it's more of a project preparation facility, an initiative that we deliver in partnership with C40 and the German development agency GIZ, and it was launched in 2015 and has so far been successfully supporting these cities to prepare and implement infrastructure projects that are for the climate, for the benefit of the climate, from our donors, the UN.
So keep picking up on that, right? Then, so how does this work? I mean, in practical, right? And how many cities has been involved? Is these the countries that it's only implemented today, or is it spread more from a global perspective, or is this the best practices countries we're referring to?
Okay, so many questions. And so let me pick up on this. We are led by our cities, and so the cities will come to us with ideas, and then we work with them to provide technical support and structuring support to develop these projects and connect the cities to the financial instruments that will be most suited to those projects. And since 2015, we have worked with 30 cities across the global south. So this financing facility is only focused on the global south. And we have worked with these cities to deliver projects across a range of sectors that are critical to the climate. So, for example, sustainable mobility, water, waste management, nature-based solutions, renewable energy, green buildings, and from everywhere from Bogota to Medellin to Durban, not Medellin, sorry, Mumbai.
Hometown, Mumbai.
And we hope to continue to provide this support on an ongoing basis for priority projects that cities identify.
Right, yes. And there is a specific project I have to ask you about.
Sure.
And that is also to connect back to our previous panel on Schneider Electric, where we talked so much about the district cooling, because when we talk about heat reuse and we talk a lot about heating, but the absolute biggest driver for energy demand today, except for data center, is actually the cooling of the cities, right? And I know you have a very specific project in Kuala Lumpur where you utilize the river water for cooling of the cities. Is there something you can tell us more about from a C40 perspective of how you support on also the cooling demands?
Okay, so we are working across a range of different types of energy efficiency and power renewable energy projects. With the Kuala Lumpur project, and let me pivot and talk about another project that is not related to the data centers at all, but it is very much about supports temperature control within buildings. So we have been working in Jakarta, where they had reached out to us for energy efficiency support and for deployment of solar rooftop panels across 28 of their public hospitals. And this was something that they have identified as a first step in towards by the municipality on energy transformation, because as you know, Indonesia has a very coal-powered energy generation base. So this initial first step is a way for the city to reduce its energy bills and then redeploy this funding towards other public services. You support the health, the staff and the patients and the comfort of everyone using those buildings, because what you have is better temperature control, you have protected the buildings against extreme weather events and also power outages, which is it's a critical piece for healthcare and public infrastructure that the cities are providing. And we're not just limiting our engagement to sort of this individual project. We're also working as C40 to help the city look at the green building codes. So that will then help other cities, that could be replicated by other cities and the private sector, so encouraging market transformation.
Hold that on scalability. I just wanted to ask Sean as well here. Climate bonds is also a way to finance climate action at the moment. How would that work from a city perspective? From a city perspective.
Well, it is working for a city perspective.
Yes,
we have green municipal bonds.
Yes,
Malmo,
tell us.
for example, one of the early ones.
Yes.
We got a discount price from the first green bond they ever issued, which allowed them to pay for the whole sustainability program. It was amazing.
Yep.
And that applies to San Francisco. That applies to Vadodara and Gujarat, who issued a green bond just early this year in January. That was 14 times oversubscribed. And everyone used to say, oh, Indian investors, they don't care about green. Were they wrong?
Yeah.
So everywhere around the world, when cities bring debt to the table, whether it be a municipal bond or a bond by a city utility, like a railway company or a water utility, they sell like hotcakes on a Sunday fair. And
so we're doing enough? Is that what you're saying?
God, no.
God, no, because it sounded like it was bread and butter and it was just ready to go.
Let me be clear. We're actually doing enough on investor demand.
Yeah.
That's there. The problem we have everywhere in the world is getting more out the door.
Yeah.
So as Aditya sorts out these city programs, they have the opportunity to start issuing green bonds. Well, they've got to have a debt rating. You know, in India, for example, there's a lot of cities that don't even do double entry bookkeeping yet. They've got a long way before they become credit worthy. Yeah. But the ones that do can take advantage of this market straight away, and it's growing. In the US, it's a real phenomena, and that's not going to change under any change of presidential administration. It's going to continue to grow. So it's a big slice of the global green bond market, which is, by the way, $4 trillion outstanding now. It's no longer small.
No.
And it needs, but you know, of course, it needs to get bigger. We need every one of the C4 cities to have a massive program that they can then use to get finance for from the private sector. That's really the point.
And are we good, because you mentioned all about this of the different cities, are we good in taking the learnings from each of the cities and each of these green bonds initiatives?
Humans are slow sometimes, aren't they? I mean, isn't it terrible? I mean, we've got the C40 trying to sort this out. I appreciate that.
So you say that she is responsible for all
no.
She fix it and then you come and help.
To be clear, we've got ICLEI trying to sort this. We've got OECD trying to. We've got an EU project. We do it. There's a whole lot of organisations now working to try and shift understandings and shift opportunity to where it's most needed. Yeah. But and in geological terms, we're moving at warp speed, right? In economic history. But of course it's not fast enough, because really we should be stopping all emissions globally at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning.
Yes.
So that's the benchmark we're against. Yes. So against that, of course it's not fast enough, but it is growing very fast. I mean, just the general green bond market has grown 100-fold in 10 years. That is pretty good growth, but it's not enough, because it needs to grow at least another 10 times to be properly useful.
And how do you see that from a developing countries perspective? Is it the same type of growth rates when we look into developing economies? As yes,
absolutely. I mean,
so
like
you see it everywhere.
That Vara bond was in India.
Yes.
And the Indian government issued a sovereign bond that was also really attractively priced. At variety in China, we see a lot of provincial bonds coming out. Cape Town has done green bonds for water resilience. And this is a bit of a clue for emerging markets, right? Mitigation is one thing, but actually resilience is turning out to be way more important because climate impacts are hitting. You know the story. You know, we failed to take adequate action. And so therefore we've got to prepare for drought, for storm, for water, for social disruption, for economic disruption. And that's resilience.
Yes.
And we published the Climate Bonds Resilience Taxonomy a couple of months ago with UNDRR and UN Women, which is guidance for what to do. That market will grow very rapidly in emerging markets in the next few years.
I think I talked to Aditi a little bit before the show, and you've raised so far about $650 million of money for this kind of project preparedness for climate projects in cities, and I know some of them, because I looked on the website, do bring together energy efficiency and renewable energies in some of the cities. So that it is happening. But you've got something you're announcing here, I think. Is that correct?
So I'm going to signal it because I am not at the point, we're not yet ready to go. It's coming.
It's coming.
But to say that the C40 Cities Finance Facility has been providing support and will continue to provide support, and so far has mobilized, as you said, $650 million since it started in 2015, and we're en route to have leveraged over $1 billion by the end of 2025 for these infrastructure projects that we have done so far, and we intend to continue to support the cities to get these projects done and implemented. I think one of the critical pieces that you raised, Sean, about developing countries and cities, creditworthiness, being able to raise bonds, that's something that is a challenge, and I think we're gonna, that because national regulation sometimes prevents cities from being able to access capital markets and or borrow internationally. But that's just to pick up on that one point. It's amazing that the cities that have done this and have done this well are like shining examples for others to follow.
But city utilities can always raise debt if they can. And when we look at what's got to happen in a city, green property, we have about $400 billion of green property bonds around the world already. A significant number in emerging markets. And that's an area of growth. So there's lots of aspects of, let's call it the urban revolution that we need to have, which are beginning to show up in the financing pipeline.
So, I mean, we are here that we don't have time, right? So we know that we have quite little time. You say we're making quite good progress, but it's not at the scale where we need it. So, I mean, to get all these financing in place and also to implement this at the scale we need, what do we need to do from now on going forward? You have a lot of great initiatives, but how do we get it at the scale that we really need to? What will be your input to that?
So, I mean, I just want to say that we you're talking about bonds, but the cities and the projects that we've done so far have tapped a range of financing solutions. So quite often we find innovative ways for the cities themselves to use their city finance. For example, in Curitiba, for the solar pyramid that we did there, the city used its own financing. But in Jakarta, we use public-private partnerships to deploy electric buses. In Durban, we use development finance institutions to help finance nature-based solutions. But in each case, we think that the city needs to be empowered and part of a process, or fully invested in the process in order to get these solutions done and replicated and scaled. So we have been working closely with these cities to build as part of making sure that they have the experience and the expertise necessary to be able to independently replicate and upscale these projects and programs, so that the objective being you shift them from a individual project base to a more programmatic approach that can actually send collective demand signals to the market, so you can have further scale up. But the point about sharing experience is where C40 cities comes in, because we bring all these cities together to learn from each other on how they do their bankable projects and what works and what doesn't work, so they can easily replicate and positive experiences and cut short the learning time. So on the climate finance side, that is also something that is where our cities would benefit from that exchange on the bond side.
And from your perspective, Sean?
Clearly, peer support and peer competition is very important. We need every city to think, oh, that city over there is doing better.
Yeah.
Oh, that's what things like the C40 are about, essentially. We need clarity about what you've got to do. You've got to make it easy to understand what are the right kind of climate investments. This is not always easy. We've been doing that through taxonomies, now national taxonomies, which are essentially shopping lists for the future, which make it clear this sort of infrastructure qualifies. If it's not on the list, actually it's not future fit. That's one part of it. And then we link that to incentives, which we're starting to do. We now have development banks, guarantee companies, providing guarantees against stuff that's in the taxonomy to cities, to corporates, and to governments. And there's a lot more incentives we can do. You know, in China, the central bank provides cheaper capital at the liquidity lending window of the central bank if you post green bonds as collateral by banks. And we're looking at the same thing for municipalities at the moment. You know, there's a lot we can do to turbocharge this. We're just at the beginning of the J-curve.
Okay. Any final closing remarks from both of you before we close the session here today?
I would just say that one of the things that we really need to think about is the international climate finance architecture around this space, because climate finance generally goes through large international financial funds and facilities, and they are aligned to national frameworks and structured to be aligned around national frameworks, which makes it an uphill struggle for cities and their projects to be recognized and receiving financing flows. So I think as we collectively work in partnership, we need to bring the private sector, the financing instruments, the national actors, and cities and the subnational piece together to think about the solutions that make this fit for purpose for the time that we're in, because I think the subnational piece does need to scale up finance, and we're here to support this, and these tangible examples are a really good way to show how this can be done.
Thank you. Fantastic summary of what needs to be done. Thank you both for joining us. It's absolutely clear that we have all the solutions we need to make a huge difference. I mean, we can do it. And the private sector has the solutions. We are ready to take the actions, and we want to implement this at scale. The world leaders can be confident that the industry can deliver on really bold and ambitious NDCs. So we want to inspire how we can unlock this finance from a city perspective.
But how we deploy and scale it in a very short period of time. We have nearly just less than 5 years to halve emissions, for example. How can we make the NDCs, these national climate plans, attract finance to make things happen on a big scale? One answer to these questions is predictable regulations and policies that truly support stepped up action for energy efficiency in cities, and the crucial access to finance that is simple, straightforward, uncomplicated, and releases the potential for cities to act, and aligned with the ability to access finance in a far less complex, streamlined way to actually save time. Let me just say, if you have any questions about this show, if you want to post some questions to the speakers, go to We Don't Have Time, its app at wedon'thavetime.org, and get involved. And we want to say thank you very much for watching, and thank you very much for Madeleine.
Thank you, Nick.
For fantastic moderation together, and we look forward to doing it again.
Yes, thank you so much.